Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of More to Explore. And I can't believe it's June already. Welcome to everybody in the chat. We've got Carrie, Jack, Chris, Osa Negro. Thank you all for being here. And we had a live, the live shot of the Grace Cam that we're featuring today, but it looks like it is getting nighttime in that time zone. So let's rewind just a little bit and see some clips from earlier in the day. But my name is Brian Bird, and sorry, excuse me. I'm glad you tuned in today because today we get to celebrate a huge success for gorilla conservation. And to tell us all about it is my co-host and Explore.org's resident naturalist, Mike Fitz. Mike, good afternoon.
Hey, hello, Brian, and hello to everybody around the world. We're happy to have you here today. If you're new to the community on Explore.org, well, then we welcome you. And of course, we welcome back all of our longtime viewers. Explore.org is the world's largest live nature cam network with about 190 live cameras all over the world. And as Brian mentioned, yeah, right now we're featuring the cameras at the Grace Sanctuary in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Grace stands for the Gorilla Rehabilitation and Conservation Education Center. The center houses a blended group of endangered growers gorillas where Congolese caregivers protect them until they can be rewilded. These are all gorillas that have been rescued from poaching and wildlife trafficking. The Grace Center in the DRC provides the gorillas with the safe space that they need to live and hone their survival skills until there's a site in the wild that they can it can be secured and they can be sent to. Grace aims to rewild all of their gorillas if habitat and habitat security and the health of the individual gorillas allows for it. And if you're not familiar with what rewilding is, it's essentially a process of ecological or species restoration. It aims to preserve and restore ecosystem functions and biodiversity. An example can include an effort to restore a formerly cultivated field or a lawn into a meadow or a forest, fill it with native plants and organisms, or you could maybe return an endangered species to a place where that species is currently absent. Or in the case of the Grace gorillas, it's releasing formerly captive individual animals in the wild to help restore and boost populations and genetic diversity. And that example is why we're talking about Grace gorillas today, because they are celebrating a historic moment, and that is the rewilding of 4 growers gorillas from the Grace Sanctuary. So this footage that you're seeing is from this morning from the sanctuary. These are gorillas that are still housed at the sanctuary. This is Kioma, the silverback. But we're going to talk about some of the gorillas that have found a new home in a national park in the Congo. So we have a full hour of videos and interviews to share about this story. It really is a story of dedication from the people involved and the success of building partnerships and community support for conservation efforts. First, let's just start out with a short introduction to the rewilding effort from Grace.
Meet Isangi, Lulingu, Mapendo, and Njingala. These 4 gorillas just made history. For the first time ever, a group of eastern lowland gorillas has been successfully released back into the wild. Their journey to this moment was no easy feat. Until recently, Virunga National Park was on the brink of losing these critically endangered apes forever. It was home to just 8 individuals. Isangi, Lulingu, Mapendo, and Jingala were orphaned when poachers attacked their families. But their story didn't end there. Thanks to the local Congolese communities and Grace gorillas, these little ones had a second chance. A chance to heal, to grow, and to thrive. Today, they're strong, they're resilient, and they're finally back where they belong, in the wild. Their release has done the extraordinary. It's boosted Virunga's gorilla population by 50%, a groundbreaking milestone for conservation. But this isn't just a comeback story. It's proof that love, determination, and community can rewild our world.
And thanks to the Grace Gorillas for sharing that video with us. One of the reasons why this story is important is that the Eastern Lowland gorillas, or Growers gorillas, as they're also known, are one of the most endangered great apes in the world. In the mid 1990s, the population was estimated at about 16,900 individuals, but it's undergone really a catastrophic decline since then. The most recent credible population estimates have that number at fewer than 7,000 gorillas, maybe lower than 6,800 Growers gorillas remain in the wild. So that's more than a drop of more than 60% over the last 25 years or so. Major threats to these gorillas include the illegal wildlife trade. There's hunting, habitat destruction, and especially the latter is driven by conflict, displacement, and mining. With so few individual Growers gorillas left, every individual gorilla is important to the survival of the species. So rewilding just these 4 Growers gorillas is the culmination of many years of work for Grace and their partners. And to learn more and to share more about this remarkable story, I was able to speak with some of the people who led the effort. So let's hear from them now. First, I will introduce Jackson Kubayaya Mbeke, who leads operations for the Grace gorillas in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And Jackson joins us from the Grace Sanctuary right now. Jackson, thanks so much for taking the time to be here. Let's also welcome Dr. Katie Fawcett, the Executive Director and Science Director at Grace. Katie joins us from North America in Massachusetts.
Thank you ever so much, Mike. It's wonderful to be here.
And finally, ensuring the health of ecosystems and populations of wild animals does not happen in isolation. Underlying every conservation success story are many different people and organizations who dedicate their work towards making the better place. Rewild is one such organization who works towards the protection and restoration of irreplaceable ecosystems in the organisms they inhabit. And Rewild partnered with Grace and continues to partner with them to help shape the rewilding efforts, excuse me, of the Grace gorillas. So to talk about that, the Rewild role in this effort, we're also joined by Mary Brown. Mary is a senior manager for Rewild's Africa program, and Mary joins me from Rwanda. Mary, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Mike. Good to see you.
Until very recently, Jackson, I'll throw my first question to you. We had, and we watched on our webcams on Explode.org, 13 gorillas at the Grace Sanctuary. The gorillas at Grace, they are a blended group of individuals that were rescued. They all experienced some form of emotional and physical trauma in the past. Before them are now part of a wild group. So I'm curious to know, why did you select the 4 gorillas, Isangi, Lulingu, Mependu, and Njingala for this rewilding effort?
Have been selected because of a result which have been set that they showed ability to be able to survive in the wild. Actually, they went through a process of integration, and we came out with the result that they are the most resilient and who can really be able to search for themselves food in the wild, and showed ability to be able to integrate a new group where they can be released. So it's really a result with from a long research, and that's how we did that, and they are the 4 who have been selected.
And Katie, when you were looking at this process, what did preparations look like from your side of the equation?
Yeah, so I think we're talking about the big moment that happened in this last year, but this was really 15 years in the making at Grace. As you said, the gorillas came into our care as a result of the illegal wildlife trade. And Jackson, his team, has spent that time rehabilitating the gorillas, giving them opportunities to learn critical survival skills, climbing trees, building nests, looking for food. And then the last 3 years, together with our project partners, with Rewild, with Virunga National Park, and with Gorilla Doctors, we've been looking deeply into the detailed planning of what would actually take to make this happen. And so from the Grace side, we've been hiring members of the local community. It was clear from the beginning that community is central to everything that Grace does. So when the gorillas were transferred to the release site, so were our education and community engagement programs. So members of the local community were hired both and trained as gorilla caregivers and as part of our education team in place there. The other part of preparation was the infrastructure at the release site. Basically, we have those who are very familiar with the facility at Grace. A similar type of infrastructure was needed to be constructed in Virunga National Park. We also needed to know more about the wild gorillas. What do they eat in this environment? How far do they range? When would be a good time to be doing the transfer and the release? So there were studies of the wild gorillas in that area too. So there was a lot that went into these preparations. I think the two major challenges we saw for preparing the gorillas were the change in altitude. So the release site is 1,000 meters higher in altitude, and that equals colder than where they are right now. And the results of studies on the diet showed that the wild gorillas predominantly eat bamboo. So that was something we were unable to prepare for in advance because we were at a lower altitude where bamboo would not grow. So from the beginning, we planned a slow, or what's known as a soft release. And some of those acclimatization pieces would be at the release site. So yeah, it was very much, I like to say it was a project which was yes, but. So what are all the different things that need to be put in place to be able to make this a success? And that's where the partnership really thrived in bringing 4 different sets of skills together for this project.
And Mary, I do want to ask you about your role in this and Rewild's role specifically, because you just heard Katie mention the different partners, and I know your organization played a big role as well. So what was Rewild's role in this rewilding effort of the 4 gorillas?
Yeah, well, like Katie said, this was a long time in the making that all culminated last year at a very exciting moment. But I would say almost every week for the past at least 5 years, Katie and I and one of our partners from Virunga National Park have been meeting regularly to do a great deal of brainstorming and strategy planning and preparation for this eventual transfer. So I was involved in a lot of those preparatory and strategy planning meetings. Also, Rewild hosts the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, or IUCN, the primate specialist group section on great apes. So within our organization, we house a lot of great ape expertise. So we were able to extend that expertise to this project. We also played a really key part in coordinating and leading the project advisory committee that was put together to help guide the process of the translocation and reinforcement. And this was a committee made up of more than 20 experts from all over the globe who have expertise in animal care, veterinary care, behavioral ecology, wildlife crime prevention, habitat protection, species monitoring. So we put together this committee, and then I helped coordinate that committee to guide project planning. Also, Rewild provided, as we do for a lot of our partnerships, a great deal of fundraising and communications support as we planned this out. And it takes a good deal of funding and coordination around how we're going to articulate the work that we're doing. So my team was very involved in that as well.
And Katie, you're doing so much preparation in advance You talked a little bit about it earlier, but what were some of those major preparations that you needed to do to transport the 4 gorillas to their new home?
So the transport occurred by helicopter. So actually the same helicopter that brought some of the individuals to Grace came back to take the gorillas to the new release site. So preparations, but that was a huge logistical challenge to prepare that. We did try very hard to prepare gorillas for life at altitude and cold temperatures, and offered them the opportunity to sleep outdoors in the evening. Not too keen on that opportunity at the time. We also, as Jackson was talking about, selecting which would be the 4 candidates. So we knew that 3 to 4 females would make a significant difference for the population at Mount Chibarimu. And we had a very detailed framework that the caregivers worked through to select which of the 4 individuals would be most likely to succeed with the at the release site. And so that was our first screening. And we also have been collecting behavioral data for several years, so we could look at association patterns between the gorillas, see who nests with who maybe has strong friendships, how that would both help the gorillas with the release site, but also what would be the impact on the gorillas at the Grace Sanctuary. And that data very much supported the observation from our caregiving team of which are the individuals to select. And then the final screen was fundamentally, we needed to make sure the gorillas are in good health. So with our partners from Gorilla Doctors, we conducted health checks on all of the individuals at the Grace Center and confirmed that the 4 that were selected were in good health for the transfer.
And then, they're in transport. I'm curious to know this answer from all 3 of you, but Katie, I guess throw it back to you right now. When they're in transport, what was that experience like for you personally? Were you feeling like anxious or nervous in that situation?
So as you mentioned, Mike, yeah, very anxious, very nervous. And as you mentioned, I'm in North America. So Jackson and his team are on the ground. It's the middle of the night. I'm at the end of WhatsApp trying to be silent, just listening. But this is how the conversation goes. It's like the team at the release site look up at the mountain in the morning and it's covered in cloud. We've just got 2 days to make this happen. And so the first WhatsApp message is at like 5 a.m. That time is the mountain's covered in cloud. The next WhatsApp message, like half an hour later, is the clouds lifted, go, go, go. And then we listen on WhatsApp as the helicopter arrives, as the gorillas are loaded one by one and make the 10-15 minute journey across to the release site. Yeah, and then we had the clouds come in, and so it was like, we can't do another run, and we're just saying, we're like, it's okay, that's okay, 3 gorillas, it's great. And then there was a long period of silence. Well, for me, maybe it was like 20 minutes, I'm not sure, but it felt like a long period. And then the last gorilla, Jingala, made the journey to the release site. So really for me, it was very much armchair, just listening to WhatsApp. So I think, Jackson, for your team on the ground, it was phenomenal. The expertise, the images that came back from the coordination of that effort, the care of the gorillas, the meticulous timings. It was just incredible. I think my favorite image is when you're loading one of the gorillas onto the helicopter. And those of you who follow Grace a long time, we know we make protein cookies for our gorillas as part of a dietary supplement. And there's a little box of protein cookies being packed alongside the gorilla as they're making the transfer. So that just kind of shows the meticulous detail that went into every aspect to make sure the transfer was a success. Vehicles have been going with food. The team thought it was important. The gorillas had food from home for the first, I think it was a few weeks before we were really sure they could do without the food from Grace. So yeah, the detail of planning the team did to support the gorillas on this transfer was amazing to me to see.
And Jackson, yeah, you were there helping with the transportation process. So what were you experiencing personally? Were you nervous or anxious or feeling hopeful at that time?
Yeah, it's a mixture of feelings, and yeah, it's the objective we had since the beginning of the project that this should happen, to give them a second chance to become again a true gorilla in the wild. So we had that motivation, and of course, when the day came, yes, it was there, the stuff was ready, but these gorillas we became like family members. And yeah, seeing a family member going away, sometimes yeah, you are not okay. Sometimes okay, it has to happen. Yeah, so it was really that, and like Kelly explained, we were able like to make these three the first time. Of course, Jingala had some issues with the anesthesia at the end, and then yeah, it was possible with the weather again. So yeah, it's a good experience we had, and we loved it at the end as we are able again to see them in the wild when they are really enjoying the life in their true habitat, their home. Yeah.
And Mary, yeah, I'm curious about you as well. You've probably worked on, many different meaningful projects for yourself. So how was, the emotions and the experience? How did that play out for you?
Similarly to Katie, because I was hearing the updates from a distance, and not in almost real time like she was, I was very excited and nervous and enjoying every moment that we heard an update. But it was just mostly, I was overwhelmed with joy. Of course, we're nervous because you get the gorillas there to the site, and that's not the end of it. The translocation is one piece, and then, you have to eventually introduce rewild the animals. But it was a huge hurdle that we've been planning for so long. And like we've talked about, so much effort, time and energy, and love went into planning for that. So even though I wasn't there on the ground with the team, that must have been so exciting for them. I was feeling a lot of it through their updates. And it was great because this is the kind of stuff that it's like why we sit down at our desks and do what we do every day. So it was finally coming to fruition.
Jackson, you and your team have so much personal experience working with the gorillas. I'm curious to know, how did the experience of integrating and socializing orphaned gorillas together to make a essentially a family unit at Grace, how did that help with their successful integration with their new wild group?
Yeah. Actually, the integration we do at Grace is yeah, coming from with an individual from uh, wildlife trade up to the level of integrating again through wildlife. So it goes through a process at the center where it has to go in the quarantine, and then the integration, the group, and then the integration in the mixing yard, then we go in the forest. So this is a very good exercise for them to know how to learn about skills which they will need in the wild, and all of this experience they had them to grace from the beginning, the day one up to the date we planned the release. They went through really a long process, and which really helped with them at the forest. I mean, for like in the forest, they can climb, they can build nests, they can rest, which of course they met exactly where they went, and this really helped them. And yeah, meet another group like when we integrate a new gorilla, it has to know how to behave in front of big gorillas. So these skills really helped that we can be able to make this possible in the world where they are. So it was really helpful, this long process at Grace.
And Katie, can you tell us about the new home of the rewilded gorillas? Where are they, and why was that location chosen?
Yeah, certainly. So they're on a mountain called Mount Cheburimu in Virunga National Park. And that location was chosen. This has been a conservation story from the beginning. And that location was chosen for two reasons. With a tiny population of gorillas that was on a high probability of extinction without reinforcement. So if those 4 gorillas weren't introduced to this population, there's a high likelihood that that subpopulation would become extinct of 8 gorillas. It was also important because, as Mary mentioned, this project has been guided by IUCN best practice guidelines for great ape reintroductions. And the first principle of those guidelines is first do no harm. And that means first do no harm to resident great ape populations, such as chimpanzees or gorillas, which are, chimpanzee and gorillas often coexist throughout these forests. And so first do no harm to the wild populations. Here, with this tiny population without reinforcement, it was likely to go extinct. So we were able to move forward at this location. Now, maybe just to step back a bit, we look at the forests in eastern DRC, and whilst the numbers, as you mentioned, are in catastrophic decline, there aren't really any empty forests that are well protected, which are suitable locations for reintroducing gorillas. Whereas the site at Virunga National Park offered a site that is well protected, has this tiny population, which could be reversed. The population decline could be reversed by the reinforcement of these 4 gorillas.
Jackson, how did working with partners make the effort a success? What did you see that allowed this to happen through partnerships? How successful was it because of the work of other organizations with you?
Yeah, really, this was a very good help for this process from the beginning. Actually, from the advisor process, where we had to get advices from our partners of how this can be done, exchanging experience, and so that we reach our objective, of course, by providing also found and all these logistics to make that happen. It couldn't be easy to do that because it's highly expensive. So this is a very good help from partners and of course some knowledge of how this can be done. Yeah.
And Katie, what did similar question to you? How vital were partnerships from your perspective in this effort?
Yeah, I think the partnership was fundamental to success. So all organizations have a mission for gorilla conservation, but all a very particular niche in succeeding with gorilla conservation. So Grace brought its skills in gorilla rehabilitation and community engagement to the table. Virunga National Park brought the location, the protected habitat, and the population of gorillas at the release site. And working with gorilla doctors was essential for the healthcare checks and providing the healthcare during the transfer and ongoing health monitoring at the site. And as Mary introduced, Rewild had a really important role in convening the project advisory committee that ensured that all of our efforts were grounded in best practice, and supporting the all aspects of the partnership throughout this process. So I really think that one of the key successes, beyond just a huge conservation success story that this is the collaborative effort over many years now and continuing going forward.
Mary, as a follow-up question to what Jackson and Katie just said, from someone like me who's looking at the rewilding of the Grace gorillas from the outside, from far away, it really does seem like these efforts are successful in large part because of community support and connections between different organizations. I like to think of it as you're building in resiliency, like resiliency is built into the structure of ecosystems. For example, a tree doesn't survive in isolation, and neither do conservation efforts. Do you see a similar comparison between conservation success and the way ecosystems are structured? Am I off base with that, or is there some similarities there?
Yeah, so I really like that analogy actually, because like you're saying, it's really fascinating in the wild how this complex network of plants and animals and fungi are doing all these incredible things around us all the time. And some of them are visible, some of them are invisible. But I do think that like an ecosystem, that intertwined network partnerships are very much the same way. Some things are going on very visibly in the spotlight. And then there are other things that are occurring more quietly behind the scenes, like those years and years of meetings that Katie and I and our partners were having in preparation for this, but they're also very important things. But we really rely on these interconnections with our partners, whether it's local communities or businesses or policymakers, researchers, technical experts, to be able to build this ecosystem of collaboration, and making that collaborative ecosystem, if you want to call it that, more diverse and inclusive, just makes it all the more successful. And this is a great example of that. This project is, thanks to Grace and Virunga National Park, this project was designed hand in hand with local communities. Like Katie mentioned, there were so many local community members, not only engaged, but very deeply involved in the project. And communities are, of course, a very integral part of conservation. We have to work closely in partnership with community-centered organizations, with individuals, if we want efforts like this to be successful in the long term.
Jackson, you had a very important role, and the Grace team had a very important role in engaging communities. This is part of your mission. This is something that you do consistently. But with this rewilding effort, how did you and the Grace team engage the communities near the release site?
Actually, in our all activities, we put the communities in the center of our actions. So from the beginning, we have been with these traditional kings, which we call Bamis, who we collaborate with them. They are a community representative. And of course, these communities who gave the land to the conservation, the site we are in. So we had to inform them up front and try to explain them the process. Of course, they knew it because for all the past time, we had to tell about the true home for gorillas, and they knew that the ultimate goal was to send them back home. So it was just to remind them about the process, how it will happen, and everyone was really fine about that. So the community were there, we had their support. They could ask how they could help. Of course, they helped about secure the site, and so they are really our guarantee. They are really our rock we sit on. So they are participating, like I'm coming from the community. So yeah, really the community, we are with them. And in all step we go in, we inform, and they know all which is happening.
Jackson, I'm curious about the community of gorillas at Grace, because there were 4 gorillas that were part of the troop, and now they are no longer there. So did the remaining gorillas at Grace react to the absence of the 4 that were just transferred back to the wild?
Yes, of course, they reacted. These gorillas, when we went with the 4, yeah, they were a little bit stressed and fearing getting in the night house. They had to sleep like in the mixing yard for a while, even for more than a month, not entering in the night house. So this was the first reaction. We said, oh, no, they missed others. And maybe they thought that if we go in the night house, that's where others disappeared. So it was a first reaction. And then after I don't know if they have forgotten about the event, they went in the night house, but they couldn't go in the 5 rooms. They had to concentrate in the 2 rooms. I don't know why, maybe try to play a politic of being many so that if a threat comes, they can face it. So it was the second reaction we observed with them, because before these 4 went, they could spread in the all 5 rooms, but that time they had to go in 2 rooms, try to be together. And then the other reaction we have seen is that the relations changed. Like we have a Tebero here who was alone before. As Amani was a friend with Isangi and Jingala, then Amani came to Itebero. So we had observed such a relation changing in between them because of absence of these 4 who went. So they are kind of reactions we have seen, and yeah.
Katie, what lessons do you think you could take away from this effort that might help Grace rewild the other gorillas in the future?
That's a great question, Mike. And I think one of our collective biggest takeaways has been the speed maybe at which this rewilding effort has occurred and the ease of integration into the group and the success to date. I think whilst this was a conservation driven project, one of my concerns was always the welfare of the individual gorillas concerned. And how do we move gorillas that have been living in our sanctuary with almost a buffet of 3 meals a day provided at this nicer, warmer, lower altitude? What would be the impact on their welfare to move to these colder conditions with a whole new diet to learn? And all animals that are being rewilded need to adjust their behavior to spending, animals in the wild spend most of their time looking for food. So that was my biggest concern. I think my biggest surprise is how quickly the 4 gorillas have adapted to the new environment, how quickly they've adapted their diet without concern, and particularly their body condition, which is our fundamental marker of sort of success. The gorillas just simply are thriving in the new environment. So the success, the ease that we talked about of integration into the wild group, we've done everything to prepare for that moment, but at the end of the day, it was up to the gorillas. Gorillas drive and lead all of our efforts, but I think we were all very surprised at how quickly the 4 girls were interested in joining Mwasa, the wild silverback. And then once joining his group, well, even before that, just like how appropriately they behaved. We'd always planned this project with adult females, that this is the age that gorillas in the wild transfer. So we were mimicking wild gorilla behavior. but still to be able to see the gorillas that were rescued from the illegal wildlife trade under 3 years of age. Jingala and Lulinga were under a year old when they came into human care. And so to see their natural behavior, appropriate natural behavior, both in the integration and then their adjustment to the diet, to building nests, was, I think that was our biggest pleasant surprise as the project went on. And now we're at the point that we've seen mating between all of the females and the silverback. So I think we're surprised at the success, but also very heartened, and are already in discussions about phase 2 to rewild further gorillas from Grace. I do want to point out that whilst this is an incredible effort for rewilding, and we've learned a huge amount about the processes and steps for rewilding the gorillas from Grace, this, I think we probably heard today, is a very intensive effort to be able to return gorillas to the wild. And really our most cost-effective or time-effective effort is in protecting gorillas in the wild. So protecting gorillas in the wild, in their forest, their wild home, so that we don't get to this point of having to do the crisis interventions that we're doing right now.
Yes, thank you for making that point. Protecting habitat, protecting gorillas in the wild is really the very first step. And with so few Grauer's gorillas in the wild, Jackson, you know these gorillas better perhaps than anyone or most other people in the world. So you can't necessarily just push gorillas into the wild once again and say, okay, have fun. How are the gorillas that are rewilded, how are they being monitored? How does it maybe compare to what you do at the Grace facility?
Thank you. Actually, before we do the reward process, we went around the site, the relocation site, to recruit a caregiver from the community. As like I've said, the community is our first priority. So they had to give us some caregivers who we trained from Grace, and then with the purpose of taking care of these gorillas once they are reintroduced in the wild. So they are there working with Virunga teams to try to do monitoring of these gorillas. So they are patrolling every day. They collect data from them. They see how they are foraging. They see how they are making their stools and all these things. They are monitoring them. So they are the one who are giving the report of how they are doing. And so daily they have to see them and come back to the site. So we have a following our plan, which is ongoing.
And I just have maybe 2 more questions for all of you. Similar questions, but given the state of the world, the warfare, the stress that is, and biodiversity loss that the world is experiencing, I'm wondering about how each of you sort of copes and deals with this. Mary, how do you find inspiration to continue conservation work while we end up witnessing things like climate change and biodiversity loss, and sometimes again the suffering of animals affected by wildlife trafficking?
Yeah, it can sound pretty dire, but something that I've found through my work with Rewild, through Rewild's partnerships, whether it's our Search for Lost Species program, where we work with partners to go out and find species that we thought were lost to science, to working with local communities to protect their homes and their lands from extractive industries or ensure that they're seeing benefits from conservation. It's that although stories about biodiversity loss and the chaos of climate change that seems to be all around us are getting a ton of attention in the news, there are still a lot of reasons to be very hopeful. This gorilla translocation, this population reinforcement, is one of the many great examples of a bright spot in conservation, where conservation groups and protected areas and local communities have come together and to rewild a species, not only to reinforce and ensure that population can remain in the park, but it goes beyond that. I think this rewilding effort is going to help protect biodiversity across Eastern DRC, essentially. It's one of the many pieces of that puzzle. But projects like this one, they're just a great example of how working together we can really do conservation very effectively. And it's why it's my inspiration. It's why we keep at it and why we keep showing up every day and doing this type of very difficult and sometimes tedious, but really rewarding and important work.
Katie, yeah, same question to you. How do you find inspiration given the challenges that we're facing in the world today?
I mean, I find huge inspiration from Jackson and his team. What they have achieved and what they continue to achieve, it just blows me away. That relentless focus and dedication against that backdrop. In Eastern DRC, there's a backdrop of biodiversity loss, the climate crisis, but also the insecurity. And touching on what Mary said about long-term efforts. So this didn't just happen overnight. This has been a commitment from the communities and the teams for the long term, and we remain committed for the long term. As Jackson mentioned, those gorillas are visited. They're used to human care. They're used to it's our responsibility to provide protection for them into the future. So to continue to monitor them, to continue to provide a safe forest, a safe environment for them to continue to grow. But I am just, if I look out my window here in North America, we have the same threats. I see the conflict between natural wild places, human populations, human development here. And to think that this team in Congo, in a remote corner of the world, is having success just gives me tremendous inspiration and hope, and should really be celebrated, the successes the team has achieved.
Absolutely. And Jackson, you and your team at Grace, you have faced so many challenges recently. There's the insecurity happening in the region. You've had to deal with Ebola outbreaks, COVID-19. How do you find, the strength to persevere through those challenges and focus on the gorillas?
Actually, yeah, despite these threats we have been facing, we always go through because of our relation with the community. Yeah, when we have something like a security, like a war, we always talk to the community and dialogue as like the community being our guarantee. They know, yeah, this project is ours. That ownership of that project, it helped a lot. And for like this disease, we do like this campaign of hygienic things, and we can distribute these washing points. So we really are in a strong relationship with the community, and that really helped. Yeah.
And one final question for all three of you. Jackson, I'll start with you first. I'm curious to know what someone like myself, an individual, again, living in North America, how can we help growers, gorillas, and the people in the DRC thrive?
I would say by joining our philosophy, by joining our team, and then it can be very helpful to help these growers, gorillas, in all our activities we do. That really will help. Yeah.
And Katie, yeah, same question to you. What can we do as individuals to help growers, gorillas, and the people of the DRC?
But I just want to start by saying thank you for everything that Explore.org already does to help growers, gorillas. I think having the live cam, being able to share this story globally is huge also for the communities in Eastern DRC. I think I hear often from Jackson and his team, to be known internationally gives a tremendous source of, is a tremendous source of pride for the team. So I thank everybody who is following explore.org, I encourage you to learn more about Grace, to learn more about growers. And yeah, join, as Jackson says, join our big family at Grace. To think together we can achieve a lot.
And Mary, yes, I want to get your perspective on this as well. Your organization, Rewild, not only partners with Grace, but many other organizations, and you have, a special role in your job in Africa. So how can we help? Again, people, the growers, gorillas, people in Africa thrive now and in the near future?
When we're thinking specifically about gorilla populations, growers, gorillas included, I think one of the very simplest things to do is be a responsible tourist. So when visiting areas for gorilla tourism, which I hope a lot of people get an opportunity to do, just follow guidelines from the IUCN Primate Specialist Group, which we talked about, to ensure that you're not putting those populations at risk. That's I think a very simple thing individuals can do. Also, another thing that very much impacts great ape habitats is you can recycle electronics that you have that are made from critical minerals, many of which are mined within great ape habitats. Then, of course, there are broader issues that are just don't just touch down in great ape range countries, but more globally. We can all collectively do a lot to decrease our fossil fuel dependency and consumption, and that's something we need to do very quickly, as we all know. I think another major thing, and this I think people can do very much on the individual level, is that we all can be a lot more aware of the impact that the goods and the foods that we consume and buy have on animals and on communities too. There are a lot of companies who are doing good, but there are a lot of things that we all consume sometimes on a regular basis that could be harming biodiversity and communities who are dependent on biodiversity. I mean, all of us are really dependent on thriving ecosystems, but companies, they know that their customers are concerned about climate change and that they want to see action from them. If they do know that, companies, they have a lot of power globally, and often companies can act more quickly and more decisively than a government can, for example, or a policymaker. And so I think if we make really well-informed, solid decisions around what we are going to support, with our money, our time, and our interests, that really individual people with the companies that they are supporting can really lead the way for a lot of this shift that needs to happen. And then, of course, like Jackson and Katie are saying, just, join us. There's so much you can do to be more informed about the work of organizations like Grace and like the work that's going on in Virunga National Park more broadly and in Eastern DRC. So of course, I encourage people to donate to organizations like Grace, who are working to protect and to restore the wild and wildlife populations. So supporting this kind of work locally or globally is really essential.
Well, that's great advice from all three of you. And again, I want to congratulate everyone for their work in this success of rewilding those 4 growers gorillas. And let's work towards a future where we have gorillas in the wild and we don't need to intervene on this level. We can enjoy them and protect their habitats and let them live their best lives. Because right now, for me, listening to this conversation, certainly in reading about everything that's happening, the world is full of stress and bad news, but let's not forget there's a lot to save and a lot that we can care for on Earth. Mary with Rewild, as well as Jackson and Katie at Grace Gorillas, are showing that there is a path forward where humans and wildlife can thrive together. The Grace story is certainly one of inspiration and hope, and I can find I hope that everyone who watches and listens to this finds inspiration from the gorillas and the people who demonstrate deep dedication to their welfare. I want to thank all of my guests that took the time out of their day to speak with me. First, Mary, thank you very much for being here. Mary Brown is a senior manager for Rewild's Africa program. So thanks again, Mary.
Thank you, Mike. Great to talk with you.
And then Jackson Kubayaya Mbeke is the Director of Operations at the Grace Sanctuary in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Jackson, thanks so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, too.
And finally, Dr. Katie Fawcett, who is the Executive Director and Science Director at Grace. Katie, thanks so much. It's great to speak with you again.
Thank you ever so much, Mike.
And thanks again to Jackson, Mary, and Katie, and congratulations to them on their effort to rewild a few of the Grace gorillas. I've learned a lot by following the Grace story, the story of the gorillas themselves, but also how, Jackson and his team, and Katie and his team, and Mary, and everybody who, all of the partnerships that are involved in this are really working towards almost like a different sort of model of wildlife conservation than what I'm used to in the United States. Because, for example, my conservation career began under the model of land protection that national parks in the United States were kind of designed under. So there are strengths to that model, but there are also significant weaknesses. Namely, the U.S. national park model of conservation most often separates people from nature. So it's not exactly or necessarily transferable to other parts of the world. Even a Virunga National Park, that you heard mentioned in the interview, that was created in the U.S. National Park model. It was basically like, hey, we're going to wall off people from this area, but its creation didn't take into account the needs of local communities. Again and again, however, you heard Jackson, Katie, and Mary emphasize the vital importance of partnerships and community. I think now and in the future, conservation efforts must incorporate the support of communities if they're going to be successful. So when local people are at the center of biodiversity protection efforts, then those conservation efforts are more likely to succeed.
Definitely. Well said, Mike. And of course, such an inspiring story. And thank you all for celebrating all of their hard work with us. And of course, with all of our live cams, we do have some other success stories to share. So we don't have much time, so it'll be an abbreviated Egg Watch, but let's see if what we can look forward to this week on Egg Watch.
Yes, very brief. But June 2nd, 2025, tons of going on our bird nest cameras. So we're just going to highlight a few of the cameras where maybe you're going to see eggs hatching coming up soon, and some of the birds are fledging or have fledged. So starting out with our osprey Charlo nest in Montana, and the Chesapeake osprey nest in Maryland in the Chesapeake Bay. Look for maybe hatching to begin at those nests at the end of this week. So we're getting really close to the window for the hatches there. Just wanted to remind everybody of that. And then for our puffin camera in the burrow in Maine with Willie and Millie there, they're incubating one egg. That camera went live on May 6th. There was an egg in there at that time. Incubation lasts about 41 days, give or take a few days on either end of that. So assuming the egg was laid in the very first days of May, then maybe mid-June hatch window for that puffling, as they're called. And then great horned owls, they're leaving the nest already. So 3 owlets in that nest. The young are fully feathered and capable of flight by about 45 days or so, and they've been in the nest about that long. So the nest has been empty regularly since May 25. So we have to look pretty hard in the trees there. But congratulations to those parents, Hootie and Wonky, for raising their young. And then the sauce's nest. Betty Lou fledged there on May 29. So congratulations to Betty Lou and Betty Lou's parents, Jack and Audacity. This is the first eaglet they fledged in that nest since 2021. And then finally, with our Chesapeake Peregrine Falcons in downtown Baltimore, Maryland, Bo and Barb have raised another clutch. And I think they've already sort of fled the coop, so to speak. They're getting hard to see on the camera. So they hatched on April 20, and they are beginning that fledging process right now.
Awesome.
So we're following these and other nests in the coming weeks. So be sure to watch explore.org anytime to watch the devotion of these birds to their eggs and offspring.
Yeah, definitely. And very quickly coming up, we do have, of course, our other shows coming up this week. Of course, the AfriCam show, if you feel like going on a virtual live safari tomorrow, Tuesday. And then on Thursday, we have our Wild Moment show to see all the best, all of the best clips from the AfriCam cameras. And then it was postponed from last week, but we will be having our Bald Eagle play-by-play with the Raptor Resource Project this Thursday, June 5th at 2 p.m. Pacific and 5 p.m. Eastern. So again, thank you all for joining us today. Of course, I have to give a special thank you to all of our moderators and camera operators for all the hard work that they do. And of course, my co-host, Mike Fitz. So join us next time for more to explore on June 16th. And until then, happy exploring.